Hey guys, welcome back to Builds by Maz. Today I'm going to be showing you a simple way to install hardwood flooring using the floating floor method. You only need a couple of tools, and it's probably a lot easier than you think. Let's get started. The first thing you need to do is remove any existing carpet, which doesn't require any tools. If you just start from a corner and pull, it should remove pretty easily. Using a box cutter or utility knife, you can cut the carpet into strips, which will make it easier to roll up and haul away. You'll need to pull up any old carpet padding as well, which may be glued down to your subfloor. I needed to remove all these parts that were stuck on by the glue, and I found that the easiest way to do that was to just scrape them off with a chisel. You'll need to pry up any of the old carpet track strips, which are held in place by these nails seen here. I used a crowbar to remove this carpet strip. It's a pretty simple process, you just got to go around the whole perimeter of the room. Because I had a concrete subfloor, some of these nails that were holding down the carpet strip remained embedded in the cement, which you can see sticking up right here. I used the back end of a hammer to pop these nails out. It was pretty simple, and these nails are pretty small, but as you'll see, it also pulled up some of the concrete. Luckily, that's a pretty easy fix, and it won't be an issue if you have a wooden subfloor. But first, I went ahead and finished pulling everything up around the room. Make sure all the dust and bits of concrete debris are vacuumed up before moving on to the next step. I used this Henry pre-made patch and level to fill in all the holes. You'll need to lightly dampen the work surface, and then you can use a small trowel to place the compound and level it off. And here's a close-up of the whole process done in real time. It really doesn't take very long, you just need to make sure you do it for every single hole. This is also a good time to make sure you don't have any uneven spots in your subfloor. You can see here that this section isn't level at all, and if I left it like it was, there would be a big gap underneath this area of the hardwood. To fix this, you can use that same pre-made patch material to level out any uneven areas of your subfloor. This is what the whole process looks like, and you'll need to make sure you keep on using your level to make sure everything is perfectly flat. Once you're done, just give it a day to dry. Now that we've got all the prep work done, we can finally start laying some new flooring. The first thing we'll do is start with the underlayment, and I chose to go with this Premium Plus version made of cork. One side has an adhesive strip, while the other has a flap that attaches to it. You need to ensure the adhesive side is against the wall, while the flap is facing out towards the room. All you need to do is roll the sheets out and then cut them to size. The underlayment adds some cushion to your hardwood flooring, helping for a softer feel, reducing sounds, and can also act as a water barrier. Once you've got a couple of strips lined up, you can peel the adhesive and fold over the flap from the previous strip to attach them together. If your roll runs out in the middle of the floor, you can use some seam tape to attach it to the start of a new roll. When you get to the end of the room, measure the amount of overlap and cut the sheet to size. Before starting on the hardwood, you need to measure the full width of the room. Using this basic example, let's imagine that your full room is 80 inches wide, and each hardwood plank is 10 inches wide. In this scenario, 8 planks would perfectly fill the width of the room. But now let's imagine instead that your room is actually 82 inches wide. Using the same 8 full planks, you'd now be left with a little 2-inch piece on the very end, which isn't ideal aesthetically. The way around that is to cut a small portion off the very first plank. In this case, we could cut 4 inches off the first plank, and instead of having 8 full boards in a 2-inch gap, we would now have 2 6-inch boards at either end, which looks much more uniform. I bought this floor installation kit, which comes with everything that you need. You'll need to use these spacers around the edges of your room to allow a gap for your wood to expand and contract with temperature changes. It's got a 1/2 inch side and a 1/4 inch side. The bigger your room, the more it's going to expand, so for a small bedroom like this, a 1/4 inch is fine. The first step is to lay out all the boards you want to use for the first 3 rows. When you get to the end of a row, you'll need to cut down the last piece to size. You can just flip it over and mark it with a speed square and trim off the excess. I did a dry run of these first 3 rows to make sure it fit properly before gluing. I used this Roberts Specialty Tongue and Groove flooring adhesive, which is made specifically for hardwood flooring like this. It's got a specialty narrow nozzle which fits right into the grooves of your pieces. You can start gluing the ends together, making sure to use your spacers against the wall. There's also a handy tool for end pieces, which makes it easy to get a snug fit. Once you get to the second row, you'll need to make sure you're gluing both the long and short edges of all the boards. Use the included mallet and edge protector to make sure you close up all the gaps. If your walls aren't perfectly straight, like this one here, it can leave a gap wider than the spacer. If that's the case, just use something else to get a snug fit. Lastly, use masking tape as you go to hold the boards together while the glue dries. You can then lay out the next row, and if you like the way that it looks, go ahead and glue it down, making sure you use your spacers, and finish it by hammering it into place. Okay, a couple tips about the end pieces. So here we've got some overlap and we need to cut the board right here. But if we cut it on this side, we'll be cutting off the tongue, which fits into the corresponding board's groove. So what we need to do is actually flip the board around. Then you can mark your new line and cut off the excess. Use the end piece tool to hammer it into place, and if you did your measuring correctly, the spacer should just barely fit into the end. Of course, you need to make sure everything looks good in case you get visited by the safety inspector. But after that, the process is basically the same for every row. You just need to lay out your boards, glue them into place, make sure you're hammering them in tight, trimming off the end piece, and using masking tape to hold them in place as you go until the glue is dried. Things can get a little tricky if you've got to run your hardwood around some kind of a doorway, like this closet here. The first issue is the door trim is sticking out, so it's preventing the hardwood from sliding up against the wall. We're going to need to trim a bit off, and I'm just going to cut along this line I've marked here with a little handsaw. And once that piece is removed, the hardwood can now sit flush against the door jamb. The next and much bigger challenge is to remove a section out of a piece of hardwood so that I can fit around the door jamb. I just took a bunch of measurements and lined everything up with my speed square, marking off the section that I needed to cut out, which I did with my jigsaw. This piece ended up fitting perfectly, and let me tell you, it was pretty satisfying seeing it sliding right into place. From there I just continued on like before, laying each row one at a time. More than likely, your last row is not going to fit perfectly, so you're going to have to cut some of the width off, making sure to use your spacers when you're doing your measurements. I made all these cuts on my table saw, and then used the end piece tool to make sure I hammered all the pieces tightly into place. Here's the last piece going in, and it really felt great to have all those done. I used this quarter round to cover up all the gaps around the border, as well as to create a transition between the floor and the existing molding. You'll need to cut the corner pieces at 45-degree angles so that they slide in together, but besides that, there's really not a whole lot of work with these. If you have a nail gun, you can just nail these directly into the molding on your wall, but I don't have one, so I just used that same glue from earlier to attach them to the wall. And that's it. I really love the way this flooring turned out, and it's so much better than our old carpet. This was the first step towards transforming this room into a home office, and I think it turned out great. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.